All right, we got Breece Hall news to get to. DK Metcalf, Matt Ryan being benched for the rest of the year. We're going to go over all of that and more. All the news that you need to know walking into Monday, week number 8. You know, we've got the Monday night game to go still, but we're going to break down everything we can to help prepare you for not only your waiver wire pickups, your trades, everything working into week number 8, the Fantasy Football Show. It begins now.
This is the Fantasy Football Show with your host, Smitty.
Take a lap.
So, devastating news. Breece Hall has a torn ACL. He will be out the remainder of the season. He's done. His rookie year is done, unfortunately. The guy was on his way to becoming the running back one. I stand behind that. I understand some people will debate it from now until the end of time, and that's fine. I don't really care. I believe this guy was turning into, if not already, the 1.1 in 2023 in Dynasty, in go-forward rankings, if you're ranking now for the remainder of the year. He was my 1.1. It's the worst news we could have got this year. Like, Javonte was bad. This is worse to me because this is the 1.1. This was the clear RB1 going forward for me. And I just created a bunch of content leading into the week about how he's my number 1 dynasty running back, my number 1 redraft running back. And what's he do? He goes out 4 carries for 70 plus yards and a touchdown, breaking off a 60 plus yard scamper into the end zone right away, right out of the gate. And then he goes down with an ACL tear, which nobody could see coming. It's not like he's injury prone by any means. It's not like you can predict this kind of injury at all. Same thing with Javonte. These are 2 top 5 running backs. I know 100%. In my gut, with my experience of 20 years doing this, I know 100% that Hall and Javonte, had they both remained healthy and not suffered freak ACL injuries, would both be top 5 running backs by the end of the year. Javonte would have been embedded in his running back role in Denver. They're searching for the Melvin Gordon thing would be out of the way at this point. Breece Hall was running back 1, wasn't becoming it. He was. Neither here nor there. That's in the past. It's time to move forward. Kenneth Skywalker is now going to make his case for being a top 5 running back, and people will debate that and push back on us, and that's fine. Kenneth Walker, ETN, Dameon Pierce, we're still doing very well in terms of show predictions for running backs, but man, we couldn't have been hit harder to our top 2 running back breakouts in Javonte and Breece Hall, but we will adjust and adapt. This man will try and come back next year and be a top 5 running back. And if you're asking me, oh, Smitty, are you all in on that? You're typically against ACL recoveries the first year back. It's always case by case. Even with Javonte, Hall, I'm not gonna just buy in. It all depends on the progress, how good they look, how fast they get to where they need to be. If you've noticed, every running back that I'm down on walking into the first year of their ACL recovery, they aren't ready for week 1. I have an instinct that Breece Hall is going to be well ahead of where he should be. I have a feeling that like 4 or 5 months in, he's going to look amazing. And people are going to be like, you can't even tell he suffered an ACL tear. I have a feeling Breece Hall is that kind of player. You never know. The most physically gifted running back in the NFL over the last 10 years, physically, Saquon Barkley, he struggled coming back from his first year. So you never really know. Every player needs to be looked at case by case. You can't over expect from a player coming back from an ACL tear based on what you want to happen. You have to look at it case by case. So we will certainly attack Javonte and Breece Hall differently, separately, unbiasedly, and if I like what I see walking into week number 1, you might see Breece Hall in my top 5 running backs for 2023. We'll take it as it comes.
To the moon
in my book, pal. No surgery for DK Metcalf. It looks like DK Metcalf's going to be week to week. He suffered a torn patellar tendon, it sounds like, which basically is your kneecap is right here and your patellar tendon goes over the kneecap. Now, your boy Smitty has a ton of knee injury experience. I consider myself as close of a expert as you can get for somebody that has no medical background at all. I have 20 years of looking at this stuff, not to mention I've suffered these injuries. I've suffered a torn ACL. I've suffered a torn MCL. I've suffered a torn meniscus. I've suffered a torn patellar tendon. My patellar tendon was a complete tear right here, and my kneecap basically floated up and I could literally push it and move it. Still attached here, but not attached here any longer. It tore right here. Now, to my understanding, DK Metcalf did suffer tearing right about where I suffered it, but he didn't have a full tear. He has damage here. And so the question is, how bad is that damage? How long will it take it to heal? It's just like tearing in there. Now that could lead to like further tearing down the road. Like if he rushed back and he goes out there and he jumps up really high and lands really, really awkwardly or with a lot of force on the knee, it could snap. Just like mine did. It would just snap right here. And that's a lot of times how you tear it, is when you have injury to it. It's already kind of torn. You can kind of look at it like, in a way, you can kind of look at it like you start tearing into this, right? And then now this paper is a lot weaker when you pull on it because you have little tears and injuries to it. So he's got to have it heal before he goes out there, because when you tear it, a lot of times jumper's knee, or people talk about tearing your patellar tendon when you're jumping and then landing. When you land and you put all that force on that patellar tendon, it could definitely snap. It could definitely tear, and this thing would be floating like mine was, and they have to reattach this part right here to the kneecap. And that's like an injury with mine where the doctor said, we got to do this right now, same day, because this thing is a real important tendon to reattach and get back in place is ASAP. It's not something where you want to wait, because then you have a situation where the patellar tendon can change and become too tight, and then you're trying to stretch it, and then you have issues when you're recovering and rehabbing it. So there's so much that goes on with the patellar tendon that people don't usually realize. It's a very gruesome injury in one sense, but it's also one that heals quicker too. Like when I tore my patellar tendon, I was running about 4 months after. And when I tore my ACL, now NFL athletes are rushed along a lot quicker, but you're typically looking at like a 9 months to a year to get kind of back to where you can try and become full go. But with patellar tendons, if he did tear this, he'd be out for the year, but you'd be looking at like a 4, 5, 6 month recovery to where he's out there doing full go stuff. But with this right here, I'm going to guess he's out for at least 2 to 5 weeks to make sure that thing is healed up. Otherwise, they could rule him out quicker, but you're running the risk of having this not healed enough, and then he tears it completely on one big jump and then landing on that knee. So good news, but expect to be without him for 2, we'll call it 2 to 5 weeks, and we'll kind of play it by ear, week by week. All right, this news is crazy, but you know what? It's kind of exciting. I know a lot of people are going to be like, well, oh my God, they got Sam Ehlinger now starting. What's going to happen with JT? Guys, this could be good. This guy isn't awful. And there's a lot of, like Ian Rappaport said on Twitter when he broke this specific piece of news, or he broke it at the same time Schefter did, where Ian Rappaport said there were a lot of NFL teams that were potentially interested in inquiring about his availability. Like, is this guy available? He's very talented. Let's not have a knee-jerk reaction and say, hey, this is a downgrade or the Colts offense collapses. Sam Ehlinger might end up being something special. Maybe he isn't, maybe he is, but I think there's a possibility of it. I think people need to be more open-minded. Plus, they're going to lean on the run. This isn't necessarily a bad thing for Pittman or JT. It could be, but it isn't necessarily a bad thing. The Colts need a change. Matt Ryan was not it. His contract is crazy. I give the Colts credit for making this move. Now, granted, here he's nursing a sprained shoulder, and they're making a QB change partly because of that, but we're hearing that the change doesn't really have to do with the shoulder, and that they're confirming through reports and sources that Ehlinger will be the starter go forward. So that confirms that it's not related to the shoulder. So I give the Colts a lot of credit for doing something that the Niners won't do by benching Jimmy G, admitting they're wrong, and admitting the contract was garbage, and just saying, hey, let's move forward and try and win football games. I give the Colts a ton of credit for this, and I kind of have a little bit of a feeling that this kid's going to be kind of exciting potentially. Not for sure, not a lock, but like in Superflex, you want to grab him. In Dynasty Leagues, you want to grab him. He might be something special, he might not be. We'll see. But it can't be worse than what we saw on Sunday, and give me the opportunity for JT to become the true focal point moving forward. And if Ehlinger can move the football enough and stretch the field with Pittman and make things work, maybe JT has a much better go forward. And I still buy JT at every turn. I'm not worried either way. I think JT having about 15 points in PPR last week off of a pretty disappointing week shows how valuable he is. I'm all in on JT still go forward, especially if you suffered some kind of Hall injury and you need to make a move with one of your wide receivers. You take a top 5 wide receiver, you trade it for JT and a Pittman, JT and a player that, look at ETN. We talked about ETN all last week. You trade a big gun for another player and get ETN thrown in. Now look how that looks. There are still a few players that have that feel that you could get for free almost right now in a throw-in and a 2-for-1. A guy like Pittman, a guy like Gabe Davis who won't be a throw-in, but you can get him ultra cheap in a 2-for-1 when you're giving up a big name player. Look, if you've got a Cooper Kupp, you've got a JJ, I don't want you trading them. And if things are working, why try and fix what isn't broken? But if you're injured, you've lost Javonte, you've lost Breece Hall, you've got Cooper Kupp, or you got JJ, or even Jamar Chase, who you know I love and I don't want you to trade in a vacuum. If you're vying for second place or not even second place, what are you going to do? Hold on to the player, or are you going to dilute and conquer? And if you get a JT and another player that could be this week's coming up version of ETN, where you could get ETN in a 2-for-1, well, that's how you recover from an injury like Breece Hall. I like this move right here. I quietly do. Njoku has a high ankle sprain. He'll likely miss several weeks with that. So there's a couple reports, 2 to 5 weeks. This is Adam Schefter here. Don't expect to have him for a while. Tight ends to look for on waivers. Taysom Hill keeps getting dropped. Kyle Pitts might get dropped this week. There's a lot of chatter of, I'm done with Kyle Pitts. You could probably trade for him on the very, very, very cheap, or look for him on waivers. Dawson Knox got cut in a lot of leagues. So we'll attack that walking into week number 8 waiver wire and make sure we discuss Pitts and Knox as being potential available guys that you might not expect to be there or notice that they got dropped. You always need to keep an eye on who gets dropped every week. Go through, look down the right side of the add drop, and just say drop. Who got dropped? You'd be surprised if you don't look at that, who's sitting out there. And you know what I'm talking about, because sometimes somebody adds somebody and you're like, they were available, because you weren't taking the time to monitor who was dropped each week. It's a very important thing to do. Prayers up to Breece Hall. What a kick right to the gut. We still got a lot of players popping off on our Moon Men list. Look at these guys right here.
The Moon Men.
Look at them.
Dropping loads in outer space.
I mean, it's the Hall and Javonte.
Space Monsters.
Just a kick to the gut. I mean, but look at these guys popping off. Burrow. We got the pancake stack.
The stack above all stacks. It's time to drop the pancake emojis in the live chat.
Drop the pancake emoji in the comment section for me. But like, what's crazy about this duo right here? Number 3. Burrow is already number 3 for all quarterbacks in fantasy football. He's actually the number 3 overall scorer in fantasy football, period. Right now through 6 weeks, through 7 weeks. Phenomenal for a guy, Mr. Cigar Smoking Joe Burrow, who started off so slow and everybody didn't want him. Very, very glad and proud and excited about all the players we're talking about on the show. We can't help some of the injuries. I mean, Kenneth Skywalker. I mean, come on. Mashed potatoes! Kenneth Skywalker is going crazy. He's a top 5 running back. I don't care what anybody says. I don't care. You don't like my bold takes? That's fine. But Kenneth Walker is a top 5 running back. He is Lev Bell meets I don't know what player. Like, he's an amazing player that is going to continue to turn heads. And people didn't want to accept that ETN was going to be what we said ETN would be, and ETN's becoming that. People didn't want to accept that Breece Hall was becoming what we said Breece Hall would be. And I don't care if he got hurt. He was the RB1 by the time he went down. He, in my mind, creating all that content walking into week number 7. He's going to be the RB1. He is the RB1. He's the best in Dynasty. And he goes out 4 carries, 70 yards, and a touchdown. He proved it right then and there. And everybody knew it. Anybody that doubted it saw him in the first quarter there, and they said, okay, yeah, it's time. Okay, he's the number 1 ACL. And you can't, I mean, again, we got to mourn it. We get a couple days to mourn it. I think it's not not bad to be a little bit upset for a couple days. It's okay. But we do have to adjust and adapt. I'm going to practice what I preach. I'm going to adjust and adapt. And I do know one thing, that if you were a follower of this show and you do have Javonte and he went down, you do have Breece Hall and he went down, there's a really good chance you own Kenneth Walker and ETN, or Dameon Pierce and ETN, or Kenneth Walker and Dameon Pierce. You own some combination of those guys, because we hammered all of these players home and beat a dead horse on the topics over and over and over all season, all off season long. So I'm pretty confident you're going to bounce back. I have faith in you. I'm going to help you. We're going to help each other to adjust and adapt and get out of any scenario that gets thrown at us. Now get out of here.
This is the Fantasy Football Show with your host, Smitty.